So today's topic is single-use plastics because it is Plastic-Free July. Yay, Plastic-Free July. But let's not just make it a one-month thing. Let's try to be plastic-free as much of the year as we can and as much of the time as we can. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly that means. The first question that I would like for everybody to think about is, what plastic items have you eliminated? I know that in my years of being on this journey of sustainability, I slowly give things up. And so I have a set of bamboo cutlery that I carry with me all the time. I rarely use straws anyway, but I always refuse them. I try to use refillable water bottles wherever they're accepted and wherever I can, among many other types of plastic and even paper that I've eliminated. I would still say I have a few other things to give up. Do we use a lot of plastic? Yes. I actually saw recently the U.S. government legislative body did like an hour and a half webinar on the plastics situation, and they were presenting some of this data. And I heard him say that this 300 million tons of plastics that we produce is more than the collective weight of humans on the planet, which was kind of shocking. I don't know what his source of data is on that. We have to go back and look up that one, but I thought, wow, that's pretty crazy. So yeah, we use a lot of plastic. What happens to most of that plastic? Well, you would be surprised at how little of that plastic gets recycled. The vast majority of it gets discarded. Some of it gets incinerated, which means it is converted into energy. It's a little better than discarding it, but not quite as good as recycling it, or just reducing how much we are making and wasting in the first place. So the thing to realize about plastics is a lot of the reasons they've got attention is because of the stuff we see. So we see it in the oceans, and that's why suddenly, right, the picture of straw and the turtle's nose is what just, made the world explode over straws. We see that we have plastic that doesn't get recycled. We see it on the beach. We know our landfills are filling up. But there are also these unknown or unseen aspects of plastic. And so the chemicals that are used to make plastics have really intense human health impacts, as well as the greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, plastic production actually uses fossil fuels. That's what we make plastic out of. So there's this movement called Plastics-Free July, which is an ambitious and inspiring thing. We are happy for the Plastic-Free Foundation for the work that they're doing, and many other wonderful organizations that are pushing the agenda of reduced plastics. It is a tough thing to do, though. Going without plastics or even single-use plastics is very, very tough. And we'll send along a resource, some links with some suggestions on things that you can do when you're trying to replace some of your single-use plastics. It can be impractical, but it is not impossible. And this is especially tough for businesses. So it's one thing to look at how you're going to reduce plastic in your own personal life, like, oh, I carry a little cutlery thing with me. It's an altogether different scenario when you're talking about large scale changes, or even in smaller businesses. There are, you have contracts in place and you have all these different supply chain elements that make it difficult to reduce plastics. And not all plastic is bad, right? I mean, we need plastics for so many of the things. I mean, right now, the desk I'm sitting at is plastic. There's a lot of plastic in my laptop. The lid of my reusable bottle is plastic, right? So there are good uses for plastic. What we're really focusing on here is single-use plastic. So let's go through some steps to reduce waste. This is a framework that you'll see a similar framework exist for food waste. And a lot of people use these kinds of frameworks. And what I think is really interesting when you look at this is that so often when we think about plastics, we're really focused on what? Recycling, right? But look at where recycling falls in this list of priorities. It's at the bottom, just above sending things to landfill. So let's walk through this step by step and take a little bit of a moment to think about each of these steps as it relates to single-use plastics. So first, rethink. Do you need to use it? Is there a different or better material that you can use when you are looking at a single-use plastic? Is there another way to accomplish what you're trying to do? Plastics Free July is asking you to sort of think outside of the plastic box, right? So it's really just rethinking when you need to use a single-use plastic. Stop and take a moment and ask yourself, like, what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish here? Right? So in the events industry, sometimes the exercise that I pose to my participants in the workshops that I deliver for the events industry is what could we do if we wanted to get rid of the name badge, right? I wish I could show you, like, I'm going to just put my camera over here. If you're seeing on the camera this my messy office, but I have this wall of badges, right? And it's all just this plastic that tends to, sometimes like people will recycle them. They have a little bin, when you leave. But I mean, it's just all these plastic holders for badges. What would be another way that we could introduce people and show people, like, this is your name, this is the company you're with, other than a badge? Now, I know it's a little bit difficult to imagine. I kind of envision some sort of like hologram floating above your head with your name and your company, but why not, right? Certainly, we're going to one day have some technology. And now, because of everything happening with COVID, we're having digital events. All of a sudden, we're having to rethink how we introduce people. And maybe there is sort of this virtual reality or augmented reality way to introduce people that doesn't require plastic. So sometimes rethinking means being very innovative, very creative, really thinking outside the box about the plastic that you're using. It also means thinking about different kinds of materials. So, for example, there's bioplastics, not the ideal. Ideally, you would just not use these kinds of things at all. But sometimes you still need these disposable items, and so bioplastics are sort of a little step in the right direction. Reduce. Can you use less of whatever it is that you are needing the single-use plastic for? Can you use less material to create it? Or I would recommend you do a little mini waste audit and you compare what you needed with what goes in the trash. So let me give you a good example that I bet you'll recognize. Have you seen this before? Obviously, you've all seen this before, right? Your typical little three-piece cutlery set with the little napkin, and sometimes there's a little salt and pepper inside, and it's all wrapped in plastic. How many times have you gotten this when all you needed was this, right? I feel like this happens all the time where I open up when there's a little three-piece thing. It's like, all I needed was one of these, all of this trash, right? So now I have all of this unused trash that I didn't need. All I needed was a spoon. Okay. So thinking about how you can reduce, and packaging is a really great way to reduce plastic. Here's something else to think about when it comes to reducing: using materials that have post-consumer recycled content. Now, I could do a whole hour webinar just on this topic. This is a very nuanced and complex topic, why we don't use more post-consumer recycled content. But it is really great when you can look for that, because it does reduce the overall production of virgin plastic. Now, virgin material is anytime we're making material from scratch. So in the paper world, you would say we have recycled paper content, or we use virgin trees to make new paper, which we should rarely do, really. Paper is a great product that can be used out of recycled content. The challenge is, the reason that right now, especially, we have more virgin plastic is, so one would be the quality. The more you recycle something, especially plastic, it degrades. Plastic and cardboard are examples of things that degrade. Metal and aluminum are examples of things that don't degrade as they are recycled, which is why you should never, ever, 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 ever throw an aluminum can in the landfill, because it has infinite recyclable value. The other thing is demand. So if there's not demand for recycled content, then who's going to buy all that recycled? Who's going to buy all your old plastic bottles if there's no demand for it? So you really have to have the right kind of demand and infrastructure to collect and process good recycled material. Right now, oil is cheap, so it's just so much cheaper to create virgin plastic versus recycled content plastic. And there's very minimal regulation around the world to really mandate that we have more recycled content in our plastics. Okay, reuse and repair. Do you really have to use that item only one single time? I mean, I know sometimes I will wash out a sandwich bag if I, like if I go to my parents' house, they use a lot of sandwich bags. So I might take one of their sandwich bags and bring something home, and then I wash it out and try to use it a few times. So thinking about, do you really have to use that thing only one time? Can you indeed use it over and over again? Repurpose. What can you use instead of the single-use plastic? So what I do is I actually use a lot of, when I buy like spaghetti sauce or mayonnaise or something like that, I'll take those jars and wash them, and those become my Ziploc bags. So I basically, if I like cut an apple in half and I'm going to put the other half in the refrigerator, most people will grab a plastic bag, right? A little plastic sandwich bag. I pop those things in a jar or another plastic box that I might have for reusing. So you think about how you can repurpose something for that single-use plastic that you were thinking about. And now to the one that everyone is most focused on, recycling, right? It's lower importance, yes, as you can see. We need to be doing all these other things first. However, this is what most people start with because it's what you see, right? When you think about rethinking, you're trying to reduce something that you haven't even used yet, right? But with recycling, I see the mess everywhere. I see the stuff on the beach. I see garbage cans piled up at events. And so the first thing I tend to want to fix is what I can see. And so recycling, while it is the lowest priority, it is the top priority in a lot of cases because it's what people can tangibly act on and it's what they see. And we want them to see change here first. And once we can start talking to people about recycling and getting them interested in that, it becomes a little easier to talk about these other things: repurposing, reusing, reducing, and rethinking. If you're trying to get everyone to really focus so much on reduce and reuse, but you've got recycle bins overflowing or the recycling isn't going into the right place, you're going to have a hard time kind of building that trust with people. And so you need to do recycling right. Even though, sometimes I hear like, oh, but all the recycling and our, it's all going to the landfill anyway. Yes, that's true. But if you would at least start collecting it properly in the right bin, once we fix the infrastructure problems, then at least the behavior of the end user will be in line. So thinking about recycling, it's important to keep a few things in mind about the reality of recycling. It is extremely contextual, meaning it is different in every city. So, in Europe, they have really great recycling infrastructure. In New York and some major metropolitan areas here, they have single stream curbside recycling. That's fantastic. I live in a small town in the Southeast United States. We have no recycling pickup. We have a place where you can drop it off, and there is literally a sign there that says, recycle at your own risk. So I tend to drive my recycling to a city about 40 miles away every couple of months. And I know that that city has said that they will not take soft plastics, which is a paper bag, a sandwich bag. Those things are soft plastics. They also won't take anything that's smaller than the size of your fist. So they say, look at your fist. Anything smaller than that won't work in their facility that they use to recycle content. So bottle caps, Q-tips, smaller plastic items really don't end up getting recycled, even though you think they will. And some markets will not take bottles that have been dyed. Again, this goes back to that recycled content situation. If no one's buying those blue and yellow and green recycled bottles, then it's really hard for a city to have a reason to take them, right? Because it costs money to actually process all that. So you need to look into the recycling situation where you live and make the most of what you're able to do there. When it comes to recycling, not only is it contextual and not only are a lot of things not actually taken, there's a lot of confusion. And then when you add in bioplastics and compostable versus biodegradable, it gets really messy. And it's like you have to expect customers to understand so much about their products and which bin do I put these things in and what can my local recycler take. And so there is a lot of confusion that we have to get past in order to get people to actually recycle their items. Rot. So this is the thing we want to avoid at all costs. But what happens when things do end up in landfill or not recycled? You've probably seen some things like this before, but whether it's in the ocean or on the ground, it can take months to hundreds and hundreds of years for things to biodegrade. As you can see, it depends on what kind of biological environment it's in, how quickly it does or does not break down. So, when you think about like these waxed cartons, right? So I sometimes buy, like I like almond milk or coconut milk or things like that. You can buy it in a waxed carton and you can buy it in a plastic bag. I try to choose the waxed carton because at least I know that this has a 3-month span, whereas the plastic bottle it comes in is going to last for hundreds of years. And of course, the plastic bottles often have the plastic wrapper around it for branding purposes. And underneath is a clear bottle that might get recycled, right? If I take it to the facility, but then it also has a lid that doesn't get recycled unless I take it to a special facility that handles that. So you have to really think about when plastics are rotting, where do they actually end up? And as I said earlier, personal choices are one thing and corporate change is an entirely different thing. And so what we're really asking people to think about and dialogue about in this office hours and really beyond is, what can companies do? Why is it so hard for companies to change? Like, what is it that really is kind of standing in the way? And what can we do to move them one step closer to reducing single-use plastics and other plastics that might be really difficult to repurpose, reuse, recycle, etc. So with that, thank you so much for joining Office Hours today, and do your best to be plastic-free in July and beyond.